Canada's Wonderland is a massive park in Vaughan, Ontario, Canada, opening its gates in 1981. Over the last 43 years, it's opened 19 roller coasters, with one on the way in 2025. Next year, it'll be tied for the second most coasters of any park in the world. They started with 5 coasters, got a bunch more when they were owned by Paramount, and Cedar Fair has given them 5 more quality coasters. If you want me to rank them, that link's down below. But today, let's put bias aside and find out which one's the tallest, fastest, longest, best paced, and rank them up based on prime ride time. These are the coasters of Canada's Wonderland, by the numbers. If you're new to the series, prime ride time starts when the train picks up speed off the lift and ends when it hits the final brakes. For launch coasters, the clock starts when the launch starts. Mid-course brake runs are left in, but if they slow the train down too much, it'll add more ride time but hurt the pacing. With the help of Google Maps and the Pythagorean theorem, I'm able to take out the lift, station, and brakes from the overall length, so the number on your screen will not match the number on RCDB. I'm going to talk about all 20 coasters in the park's history, but I have to leave one off: Wonder Mountain's Guardian. This is a coaster, but it's mostly a dark ride, so it crawls through most of its course. It's 60 feet tall, that would have been 12th place. Hits about 25 miles an hour, that would have been second to last. And it has about 784 feet of prime ride track, also second to last. Because it spends most of the ride barely moving, its 7.3 feet per second is last by a mile, and its 107 seconds of ride time is first, a full 40 seconds above the rest of the field. This would throw off all the ranking, so I'm not including it with the rest of the coasters. But if you ride it, don't forget to add it to your credit count. In 19th place with 9 seconds is Taxi Jam, an E&F Miler family coaster. This oval layout is about as basic as it gets, rising up 8 feet. I'm calling that second to last, and you'll find out later why. But it's 10 miles an hour is last, 144 feet is last, and 16 feet per second is last, albeit not by much. There is another coaster knocking on the door. In 18th place with 28 seconds is Snoopy's Racing Railway, an Art Engineering family launch coaster. This just opened last year and is butter smooth, using drive tires to get the train up to 31.1 miles an hour, that's 16th place. Also using a mid-course boost, not having a main drop but gets up to 39 feet, that's tied for 15th. It winds around its plot, covering 804 feet of track, third to last, and it sends you around twice, but it's a by the numbers rule to only count the first lap. But don't fear, if you wait 45 minutes for it, you do get almost a full minute of ride time. It has pretty decent pacing, 28.7 feet per second and finishing 13th. In 17th place with 29 seconds is Silver Streak, a Vekoma Hang and Bang. One of 4 coasters that hang under the track, Silver Streak is the only one geared towards families. Its 48.6 foot height is 14th place, but doesn't have a main drop. It goes into a helix off the left and just works its way down, at some point topping out at 26 miles an hour, that's third to last, and is on a compact plot, only sporting 792 feet of track. Only Taxi Jam is shorter. Its pacing is up at 14th, covering track at 27.3 feet per second, just behind Snoopy's Racing Railway. In 16th place with 31 seconds is Vortex, an aero suspended coaster. For a long time, this was the park's premier coaster, a rapid-fire suspended coaster that stays very low to the ground and buzzes the water, and right away you see it's fourth in pacing at 60.8 feet per second. It only has 1,885 feet of track, but because of the nature of most of the coasters in the park, that's up at 7th place. It's also top half in height and speed, going up on top of Wonder Mountain and diving down 85 feet, that's 8th, and topping out at 55 miles an hour, 7th place. In 15th place with 32 seconds is Bat, a Vekoma Boomerang. Here we go again, another boomerang, and every time I have to point out how this is broken up. You double the track minus the length of the first lift, so you end up with 1,720 feet of track, 11th place. I stopped the clock for 9 seconds while it climbed the second lift, and in the end, you have 32 seconds and go upside down 6 times. At 116.5 feet tall, it's 5th place, but not every seat hits that point. The back comes the closest at the beginning, and the front comes the closest on the second spike. It hits 47 miles an hour, that's 11th. And it has decent pacing in 7th place, 53.8 feet per second. That is, after you disregard the second lift. I do leave in mid-course brake runs, but I take out mid-course lifts. It's just a by-the-numbers rule. In 14th place with 33 seconds is Ghoster Coaster, a Curtis D. Summers wooden coaster. A park original, this family-sized wooden coaster starts with a 39-foot drop, tied with Snoopy's Racing Railway at 15th place. Maxes out at 35 miles an hour, tied for 14th. And in that double out and back layout, it only covers 884 feet, that's 4th to last. And those slow turnarounds hurt its pacing, finishing 15th right below Silver Streak, 26.8 feet per second. In 13th place with 34 seconds is Skyrider, a Togo stand-up coaster. The one coaster that's gotten kicked out of Canada's Wonderland. This opened in 1985 and shut down after the 2014 season. This had an 84-foot straight drop, that's 9th. Hit 51 miles an hour, that's 8th. Went into one inversion, a helix, and a bunch of little airtime hills, covering just over 1,800 feet of track and finishing 9th. Covering that track at 53.5 feet per second, 8th place. All around, very average stats. In 12th place with 35 seconds is Dragonfire, an aero looper. One of the first 4 inversion coasters in the world when this opened up at the park in 1981. It starts with a 76-foot drop, 11th place, maxed out at 50 miles an hour, that's 9th. Goes into 2 loops, a big turn, 2 corkscrews, a mid-course brake run that doesn't seem too harsh, and then an upward helix to end, covering 1,625 feet of track, that's 12th. This is right in the middle in pacing, 46.4 feet per second in 10th place. In 11th place with 36 seconds is Flight Deck, a Vekoma SLC. I know, my last episode was about my 15 worst active coasters, and 3 of those were at Canada's Wonderland, so here we go again. It's one of 6 coasters that top the 100-foot mark, this being the shortest of that bunch, 6th place in height at 109.3 feet, but is actually listed with a slower top speed than Dragonfire, 49.7 miles an hour in 10th place. It has 5 inversions over a pretty forceful course, 1,752 feet of prime ride track, that's 10th, and it's just ahead of Dragonfire in pacing, 9th place at 48.7 feet per second. In 10th place with 37 seconds is Time Warp, a Zamperla Volaire. Flight Deck's neighbor, the Gruesome Twosome. You might remember this from my last By the Numbers video also. This has a spiral lift that reaches 50 feet, that's 13th, but doesn't have a main drop, just some dips and twists, going back and forth in the flying position. Its top speed of 25.7 miles an hour being second to last, only ahead of Taxi Jam, covering 902 feet of track, which is 15th. And as you would expect, it does have terrible pacing, third to last at 24.4 feet per second. In 9th place with 41 seconds is Thunder Run, a Mach-powered coaster. Some may not even call this a coaster. It's entirely powered and doesn't use gravity, but for this video, I'm counting it. It stands 33 feet tall, but that's where the station is. I'm listing this with a 0-foot drop. If it changes elevation, it's not noticeable. It just whips around Wonder Mountain, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. It gets up to 40 miles an hour, that's tied for 12th. Has almost 1,100 feet of track, that's 13th. And that power track covers itself at 26.4 feet per second, 4th to last. This does give you 2 laps around the course, so you actually get 82 seconds of ride time. But like I said before, my rule is 1 lap only. In 8th place with 46 seconds is Alpenfury, a Premier Ride Skyrocket. The one coaster that doesn't even exist yet. All we have to go on is the animation, so that's what we'll use. After launching out of the mountain and up into a top hat, it hits 71.5 miles an hour, that's 4th. The top of that top hat is 164 feet off the ground, and then it twists down 154 feet, that's also 4th. And from there, it has a linear out and back course, covering just shy of 3,300 feet, 3rd place. According to the animation, its pacing is also excellent, 71.3 feet per second. That's 2nd place, but still more than 15 feet per second behind 1st place. In 7th place with 49 seconds is Leviathan, a B&M Giga. This may have more than a mile of track, but here it is at number 7 on the prime ride list. I had to get rid of more than 1,200 feet of track. From that huge brake run that's about 550 feet long, to the enormous lift, its prime ride track is only 4,261 feet, and that's 2nd place. Aside from that, Leviathan is king. The first B&M Giga stands 306 feet tall, that's number 1 by 61 feet, clears the field in speed by 11 miles an hour, 92 miles an hour, and has the best pacing. I mentioned Alpenfury was a distant second. Leviathan covers 87 feet per second. It may be a short ride, but it's a stat monster. In 6th place with 50 seconds is Yukon Striker, a B&M Dive. The world's tallest and longest dive coaster. This stands 223 feet tall, but that underwater tunnel gives it a 245-foot drop. Way behind Leviathan, but still good for 2nd place. Same story for speed, 80.8 miles an hour, 2nd place behind Leviathan. But despite being the longest dive, it's only 5th in its own park, 2,805 feet. It does have a mid-course brake run, and everything after that hurts the pacing, but it still lands at 5th place at 56.1 feet per second, almost 5 feet per second behind Vortex, which is kinda surprising. In 5th place with 51 seconds is Backlot Stunt Coaster, a Premier Rides launch coaster. This starts with a very punchy launch, hitting 40 miles an hour. That's tied with Thunder Run for 12th, spiraling up to the ride's highest point at 45 feet, then dives down 31.2 feet, 3rd to last. It does have some decent length, 1,842 feet, really close to Skyrider and Vortex on either side of them at 8th place. However, its pacing isn't great, 36.1 feet per second in 12th place. This does have a show section where the train stops and you see a helicopter and flames shoot in the air, but from my POV, it just rolled right through, so that's not the reason for the bad pacing. In 4th place with 54 seconds is Mighty Canadian Mindbuster, a Curtis D. Summers wooden coaster. Another park original, this wooden coaster in the back of the park was also featured in my last By the Numbers video. I'm sure you remember that 87-foot drop, 7th place, 55.9 mile an hour top speed, 6th place, going out and back, having a big slow turnaround, and a gigantic drawn out upward helix to end, close to 3,000 feet of prime ride track in 4th place, covering that at a pace of 55.2 feet per second, good for 6th place and just barely behind Yukon Striker. In 3rd place with 58 seconds is Fly, a Mock Rides Wild Mouse. Death, taxes, and a wild mouse crashed in the top of my By the Numbers video. Fly is a Mock Rides large park wild mouse, so it starts with a drop just shy of 50 feet, that's 13th. It gets the train up to 35 miles an hour, the same as Ghoster Coaster, tied at 14th. Then, it slows down a lot and rises into its switchbacks, having a few dips along the course, but taking almost a minute to navigate 974 feet of track, that's 14th. And of course, its pacing is second to last at 16.8 feet per second, being saved from the bottom by Taxi Jam, less than a foot per second slower. In 2nd place with 61 seconds is Wild Beast, a Curtis D. Summers wooden coaster. The last of the 5 park originals, this wooden coaster is more compact than Mindbuster and also has way less track. This is 6th place at just under 2,300 feet, still almost 700 feet behind Mindbuster. Wild Beast has a 78-foot drop, that's 10th. Is actually slightly faster than Mindbender at 56 miles an hour in 5th place. And no surprise, it takes longer to cover less track. Its pacing is way down at 11th, 37.7 feet per second, just barely ahead of Backlot Stunt Coaster. In 1st place with 67 seconds is Behemoth, a B&M Hyper. The king of ride time, Behemoth has a full 18 more seconds than Leviathan, and it's also longer. It's number 1 at 4,437 feet, not wasting as much track as Leviathan when it comes to that brake run. It's 230 feet tall, that's 3rd, also 3rd in speed at 77 miles an hour, and despite those big hills and mid-course brake run, it still does pretty well in pacing, 66.2 feet per second in 3rd place. It doesn't look like a pacing monster, and it's funny to think it outpaces Vortex by 6 feet per second, but that's what happens when you have so much speed to work with. After each episode, I'm starting to find the average rank across all 5 categories, trying to find the overall winner. Still, Behemoth comes out on top with an average score of 2.2, Leviathan just barely behind at 2.4. No surprise, Yukon Striker and Alpen Fury are next. Then, the 2 big woodies in Vortex. From there, you have some of the mid-sized coasters, Flight Deck, Skyrider, and the Bat. And then, move into some of the smaller stuff like Backlot Stunt Coaster and Dragonfire, all the way down to the family coasters, all 4 of them taking up the bottom 4 spots. That's all I have for now. Let me know if anything here surprised you or confirmed something you already knew. I was surprised that Leviathan was only 7th in ride time. 49 seconds just doesn't seem right, but it is a short ride and does sacrifice a ton of track to non-prime ride causes. Also, I couldn't believe Vortex was ahead of Yukon Striker in pacing. Usually, the big fast coasters have a big advantage, but even though Yukon Striker's drop is 160 feet taller and is about 26 miles an hour faster, Vortex's crazy lower-to-the-ground second half pushes it into 4th place, and Yukon Striker has to settle for 5th. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you're new here and love coasters, please give me a sub. I have a playlist with more By the Numbers episodes, that link's down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.